Before we start, I just want to ask, how many people here are either artists or programmers? So if you're an artist, could you raise your hand? Okay, a lot of artists. And programmers? Two programmers?
Couple.
Okay.
One does both.
Do we have any students as well? Students?
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of students. Okay, that's good. And anybody who's not a student, raise their hand. Professionals? Or...
So
Okay,
now you know
great.
everything there is to know about them?
Well, I mean, we can guide the discussion.
Yeah. So let us know if there. We'll open it up for questions, but we have a few topics we'll talk about, and the main thing we'll talk about is if you're a programmer, how do you find an artist? If you're an artist, how do you find a programmer? And how do you work together? I guess And so first of all, maybe Burton, you could start off talking about how you've found artists to work with, or.
Okay, so we had talked about this last week, but a lot of the people that I've worked with, I've actually worked with in other engagements, like jobs. So I knew I wanted to make my own games. I kind of knew I needed to work around to that. Somebody wasn't going to give me, Sony wasn't going to open up their checkbook the day I graduated. So I got jobs doing things that were pertinent that I could apply towards making games. Everything I do is got to be towards this goal of being able to make my own stuff. And so along the way, I met people in my jobs, and basically my coworkers, I'm qualifying them as are these the kind of people I want to work with? What qualities do these different people have that I want on my teams or not want? And so a lot of the people that I work with have come from, or pretty much everybody has come from, working together, either on a contract or in a job.
Yeah, so networking and getting yourself out there is pretty critical. For me, I came from kind of the opposite end as Burton. I was more of a programmer on enterprise web software, so I was getting into game development. I didn't know anybody, so I decided the best thing to do would be to have an art test and try to hire an artist. And then, the thing that I was wanting to do was, give them an 8 hours of paid time and see what they came back with. And a lot of good stuff came out of that. I met Sebastian actually that way, and I think it was a pretty good idea. But so you want to talk about maybe
How I find people to work with?
Yeah.
Well, so in the current project that I'm working with for my own personal time is actually from a former employer. So basically every person that I've worked with has been just some person on the internet. With the way I've usually found those kinds of jobs is just going online. Reddit has a game dev classifieds subreddit that's pretty good. It's done well for me. And that's pretty much it. I just got lucky, more or less.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know for even for this game, it was kind of a last minute thing.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. He was one of the last people actually that we brought in. We had a lot of people apply, and we had 12 people that we picked that we thought were good. We did interviews with them, and then we narrowed that down to 8 that we did art tests with, paid art tests. And then my brother-in-law actually was trolling Reddit and found his posting and said, "Oh, this guy looks like could fit our aesthetic," and so we actually reached out to him. And so you never know. I mean, posting that you want a job is as important as applying to jobs. So I mean, I think that can.
Yeah, definitely make sure that you're at least putting your work out there, even if you don't feel ready. I know when I first started, what happened is I graduated from college, just got normal jobs, and eventually I got sick of them. They were just not very fun, but. And you just start putting your work out there, start putting out work wanted ads, whatever type of artwork it is you do, and just keep making more art, building up your portfolio, making sure people know you exist, and just waiting and building more stuff. In the beginning, a lot of you guys said you were students, so I wish I had done this, but make sure when you're still in school, you're doing something. Don't just kind of chill at home, play games or, whatever it is you're doing. Definitely try to collaborate with a lot of people that you know and actually produce some games. That's how I got started. It was a school project, and then we ended up getting a publishing deal with Screw Attack. And that was like the first big thing on my portfolio that I could use to show people that I saw a project from beginning to end that over the course of probably a year and a half. So do something when you still have the extra time, if you do. I know a lot of people work too, but definitely get cracking on that stuff.
So when you're out there looking for work as an artist, maybe Burton, you could tell us a little bit about what are you looking for when you interview somebody, or when you're trying to pick a collaborator, maybe.
I'm looking for people, and I've done this. So I worked before I went second time indie, and in between I worked at Hi-Rez Studios here in town, and when I looked for people there, and kind of my mentality is I want to see like how regularly people are practicing their craft, because we always need to get better. No one's I mean, there's a few people I could say like, oh yeah, you're the best concept artist that maybe in the world, but people that are just constantly getting better, and they're like Sebastian said, they're putting themselves out there, so I can see that they're constantly practicing their craft. So if I go to somebody's website and see a portfolio video and it's got 2016 on it, that's it's like, when are you looking? Are you actually looking? Or are you are you just willing to give me what you had last year? And so I just want to see that people are hungry, and that they're making an effort to get better and keep practicing their craft and stay sharp, because people like Mike and I, we don't want to pay for people to warm up.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when I'm interviewing people is I'm looking for enthusiasm. I definitely want art skill, but by the time you get to the interview, I've already qualified your art skill, so I've looked at your portfolio. I know pretty much what you can do. So it's more about, do I think that you're going to bring a passion to the project? What questions do you ask me about the project? Do you have ideas about the project already based on the information that I gave you to do the art test? I mean, so these kind of things are important, and I think I hired two people when I hired Sebastian. I hired another guy as concept artist, and basically I hired him because he was super enthusiastic about the project, and I like Sebastian's work better, but I thought, let me see if I can figure out some way to get this guy involved as well, and so we did some concept art.
And just one practical application of this, if you're not posting regularly, since it's the internet, people don't even know if you're alive. So make sure you're keeping your work up to date, and make sure also, if you are doing jobs, that you're not stepping on your employer's work. So don't post anything early if they don't want you to post. If you sign any NDAs, make sure to really stick with those. So yeah, just don't just drop off the face of the earth, because also if they see you don't have a recent posting, they're like, okay, they can just cut you out really quickly. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be applying for jobs. So the simplest things that just can disqualify
it definitely is something that you look at for sure, like Burton said too. So I guess you mentioned NDA. Maybe we should chat about contracts real quick. Do you? I know we when we were talking about this, the first thing is we're not lawyers.
So don't take anything as legal
So don't
advice.
listen to I mean, we'll give you some ideas, but I mean, if you have questions, you really should consult a lawyer. But I think especially the first contract that you get into, it's probably a good idea. The key thing from my experience is that you want to have the words from the employer point of view to make sure that I own the work. If I hire you and I don't specify anything in the contract, you still own the work, and if I use it, you could technically sue me. So the important language from an employer standpoint, or from the studio owner, is that it's a work made for hire. And if that's not in the contract, you should be very cautious from that point of view. Now, obviously, depends on the deal you're making, but
so that it actually depends on the state too that you do work in. And the strength of those things kind of vary.
Yeah, and the country too. Country also.
I mean, it's from a leading a project sort of standpoint. That kind of stuff is, you ever do, you got to make sure that stuff's buttoned down, and sometimes you can, good faith stuff can come back and
If
bite
you
you in the
if you
butt.
want to see what happens when you don't do that, watch Indie Game the movie.
Yeah. Is that Fez? Is that what
Yeah, Fez. Yeah. He basically did this. Didn't have a contract. Got sued.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be bad.
But also as somebody that's like working for somebody else, like if I have a client, I want to make sure that I have the rights to be able to talk about, I guess, like you were saying, talk about the work, be able to present it as my own. And if I can't name like the brand or something or the company that I'm working for, then I'll just at least can describe it, like generally.
It's interesting, yeah.
Around it, but you want to make sure as somebody that's creating content that you, even though if I do work for Mike, he owns it, that I try to do something in my interest to be able to say that, hey, I worked on this project, and when the time is right, when it's released or whatever.
What about from the artist's perspective? What do you?
Well, mostly, I guess generally, everybody needs to understand, what the financial arrangement is. So right off the bat, you need to know that. But as far as contracts and artists is concerned, I would say probably you need to know what the restrictions are on posting the work, because that's how you keep showing that you're active and showing that people are interested in your work. A lot of people make art, but if nobody's interested, your value goes down. So if somebody knows you're in demand, whether or not you're the A+, 100% best person ever, if people still hiring you, that at least it says you're good to work with at the minimum, that you produce well, and you keep up everything. Excuse me.
People want what you got.
Yeah. So make sure you have that in your contracts if you write ones, that you can exhibit the work, and of course there's probably going to be some kind of exception to account for like spoilers, or before the game comes out, you don't want to show too many things and things like that.
So what about? There's a lot of different ways you can get paid as an artist.
Or not.
Or
paid.
not. Yeah.
Or not paid.
So I mean, the ones that we talked about were, obvious. Yeah, exposure, right? So free exposure, and obviously flat rate per asset, I guess, is one way that a lot of people want to do it, or hourly billing, or some kind of a revenue share.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in.
Yeah,
on this.
go ahead.
So, a lot of people are students, like, again, raise their hands. So, now's a good chance to do your free work with your colleagues, with fellow students, start building up a portfolio. Rev share, if you have the time and the financial means to not be paid, rev share is not a bad option, but you have to be very careful about picking who you're working with. If it's somebody you're not familiar with, you need a contract, 100%. And if it's somebody that you're not familiar with, scrutinize their portfolio as much as they would scrutinize yours. So don't just answer some random revenue share ad out there with somebody who has no previous work experience. It's most likely just somebody who's excited with their own idea, and they're probably not going to execute. So be very careful of that.
Beware the ideas guy.
Yeah.
And I would say keep in mind that your time is valuable. I mean, if somebody wants you to do work that's in their project, then they're assigning value to your work. You should assign the same value and make sure you're getting something in return.
Right. And there's one other thing about revenue share. If you happen to be very lucky and a well-known developer or a well-known studio is doing some kind of side project or something, definitely consider that. And then what was the last one?
Flat rate.
Yeah, flat rate. When you're starting out with a flat rate, and probably to some extent with hourly, you're almost guaranteed to undervalue your artwork. It happened to me, and it'll be a learning experience. It's probably going to happen, just because you don't know how much to charge yet, and also because it's going to be one of your first jobs. So you're like, okay, I just really want to work so you put your prices lower.
Yeah, you want to please people too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to get the job as much, you know.
Yeah, and there's valid reason to do that. I mean, if you're light on projects, then lower your rate so you can get some work. But do that on an individual basis. Don't start spreading your prices all over.
Yeah, I think flat rate is from the like developer or like founder of studio perspective is kind of confusing. Like I'm never quite sure about, like I'm hesitant to hire someone at flat rate because I think, well, what if the quality is not what I want, you know? And I mean, I'm much more on the billable hour side, but I'll tell you this, I'm gonna want to work with somebody and get comfortable that they're billing me correctly too, because that's the concern on that side, is that I don't really know exactly how long it takes to do things. I mean, I'm a developer. It always takes me twice as long as I think it will. So I just assume that's the case for artists too.
Yeah, but also for flat rate. Well, actually, I've done most of my work in flat rate because I think when you're doing smaller jobs, especially smaller jobs and smaller budgets, a lot of people, they have the money in hand.
They want to know how much they're spending.
Yeah, and they want to know,
Yeah.
like, okay, is this going to fit my budget or not? So that's useful. And then for the hourly, I've only done 2 projects with that, and those are the longer term ones. And I assume you would probably do more hourly work with like actual companies and stuff if you were contracting with them.
Yeah.
But usually, if it's, at least in my experience, if it's independent people or people who aren't running a company formally, they're more open to just flat rate, which is where you're really going to have to decide how much your time is worth, how much your work is worth. And it's going to take a bit of...
How many revisions you're willing to accept? I mean...
Oh, yeah, that too. That's another thing that I forgot in contracts. Make sure you have a revision policy. Because if you don't have one, people can just keep asking for more and more revisions, and it's going to take up more time. And if you're doing flat rate, that's going to really balloon the cost for you as far as time's related. Another thing about that is, don't do live revisions, ever. Okay.
What do you mean
Can
by
you
that?
define-
Yeah.
If somebody says, let's say you're talking on Skype or Discord or something, and somebody says, oh, I wish this thing was different, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll go change it. What do you think?
It's like the virtual art director standing over your shoulder.
Yeah.
Thing.
Don't do that, because then there's a good chance that
Yeah.
it's just going to be, I guess, frustrating to keep going back and back. Okay, tweak this
I don't
thing
like
and then
that
tweak
color.
this thing. Yeah. So just get all your feedback in email or written some way so that you can look at it, you can do the revision, they'll know you made the changes, and they can go back. And also it gives them a chance to just not overanalyze. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you want to add?
I guess the reason why we're spending time on this is because it's really if you're doing right by yourself in your work and the people you're working with, and you in like respectful relationships where you feel like you're getting taken care of, their needs are getting taken care of, like you do better work. So that's why we probably all kind of done it the wrong way. So we're just trying to get that stuff is a little dry, but it's like super important. Like I was gonna say, like I've learned you either do the work for what it's worth to you, or you do it for free. Because if you don't do it for what it's worth, or you try to like take a cut, I mean, unless you're like needing to make rent in like a week or something, and they're gonna give you 50% upfront, but you just need to. You're not gonna do the best job if it's under what you think the work is worth. So it's just gonna happen. It's hard to like say, I'm getting paid $12 an hour, and I know I would normally charge $50. You're not going to. There's no way you're gonna like feel like that every hour of work for them. You're gonna treat it like it's $12 worth of work instead of $50.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit away from the contract stuff. So like I mentioned before, I hired a concept artist also, and had a bunch of concepts done for things. What do you guys think about concept art? I mean, how does that fit into the whole picture?
Yeah, I'll start. I think you should make a practice of doing concept art just for your own purposes. If they don't say, oh, I need a concept, do it anyways. You're just going to save you time a lot of times. So, for example, if they need some kind of main character, real quick, not more than an hour or something like that. Come up with like 3 to 6 sketches of characters, label them A, B, C, D, send them out, and then you'll have a good starting point to keep working from. Saves you time, saves them money, and
Yeah,
makes
we've definitely done that a lot.
Yeah.
So I would say, okay, I need enemies, and here's a few reference images, and he sends me back 8 pictures. You know, 8 pixel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably a bit easier with pixel art because it's smaller, but yeah, it's going to save a lot of headache later down the line to be communicating as early as possible. And another thing is, if you're doing all your work over the internet, there's going to be a lot of emails back and forth. So what you can do is you have, hopefully you'll have multiple projects at some point. You do your exploratory work for one, email them, get back to work on something else while they're, doing whatever it is they're doing during the day. They can give you feedback. After you've worked on that, you come back, do this.
Yeah.
Just keep going around. Don't just roadblock yourself on one thing because you have to do revisions and all this stuff.
So I'm going to take another quick poll of the room. How many of you are concept artists out of the art people? Okay. And how many of you are like 3D artists? I see there's a little bit of overlap over here. So, and do we have any pixel artists in here? We got one. Okay, cool. Sort of. Yeah, you dabble.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, from my perspective as like an engineer and not an artsy person, I think concept art is really important because it really helped me kind of. I have a description of what I want the game to look like, but I can't really visualize that when I'm talking to people. I could just keep saying the same words over and over again, but getting that concept art kind of helps like the world come together, and it sort of helps your world building, helps people visualize your project, helps me communicate like with Sebastian what exactly I'm looking for. Here's kind of the look that I'm going for. So it's, I guess it depends on your concept artist. My guy was pretty fast. I think he used one of those Wacom tablets or whatever, and he could churn stuff out pretty quick. I mean, like I got 40 images. It seemed like he was doing about 1 an hour.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's important. One thing that I learned was kind of setting like a time frame for like check-in for that kind of stuff, because I've had people that they're super good artists, but they can go off for a couple days. And
Yeah.
For a piece of concept art that isn't right, and it's just because, when it was still rough and just really loose, no more than like, some pencil drawings. Like we could have stopped it there and changed the course and ended up in the right place. So I like to ask somebody just to keep it real loose and just do some thumbnails and get back to me in a couple hours or something like that, or the end of the day, and just check in before it gets too far along. Because what they could be doing is great work. It's just not right for what we're doing. So I like to make sure that the turnaround is real quick. But yeah, I've worked with some people that the stuff I like is like a page full of like all these things, because sometimes I'll just start pulling pieces from the different sketches and saying like, this one.
Yeah.
That's how we built like all
the cool
robots.
thing my concept guy did is that he put together like, okay, for a character he would just draw like 20 heads and several different bodies, and then I would say, okay, I like these heads and these bodies, and then he would make like a rougher sketch, and then I would say, okay, yeah, it looks good, but let me change. Why don't you change these couple little details, and then he would finally get me to the actual concept art. So it was nice to have that kind of process in place that I could use to get to the final look that I wanted. So, any other thoughts on that? Or?
I think I'm good.
Okay, so let's talk about like feedback. I think feedback between programmers and artists is probably the big topic. So how do you give good feedback, Burton?
How do I try to give good feedback?
You do it.
I make sure one of the things that I try to do is just when I'm ready, when I see something, I actually let myself I look at it, and I usually have. I try to be pretty creative myself, and I'm developing the skills so I could be a better communicator. But sometimes I'm too critical. So what I'll do is just either sleep on it. So if it's at the end of the day, I'll just revisit it in the morning when I've had some time to look over it. but I want to make sure that the goal is my feedback has to be respectful and productive, because especially on small teams, like I could be basically like knocking the wind out of somebody with something that's too harsh or not directed towards, moving them in the right direction versus just being critical. So I'm not saying like my default is always to be critical, but I just I have high expectations, and sometimes I need to work on like how I communicate that. So usually what I do is I just sit on it for a while and then just make sure that whatever I'm going to do is going to honor the effort that they put into it, and make sure that I find the good qualities of it and figure out how we can take those good qualities and build on them towards kind of where I wanted to go. But I also, I didn't really chime in earlier, but when I work with people, I really want people that, and sometimes I have to really squeeze it out of people, is sometimes when I hire people, I actually really want people that have a strong opinion. And if I say I don't like this, I really would love personally, I would love for, in a respectful way, an artist to defend their work and say like, well, the reason why I did this was because of this, and if they can prove their point, then they may change my mind. So I like when I can give feedback, and if they really felt strongly enough about the direction they took it, then they're willing to present their case too. It's not like a defensive thing, but I like for a little back and forth. And sometimes it's hard to give people that. I think as a contractor, you're afraid of offending your client.
Yeah. How do you feel about that, Sebastian?
No. Let
Do
me
you
think.
defend your work
I
on
had
there?
a plan of what I was going to say because I was going to go in turn, but you like.
Now I've just
You
thrown
mix-
you a rich.
Yeah, it was the mix-up. So I guess this will just tie into what I was going to say. Since we're talking about artists and programmers collaborating for the most part here, it should be pretty obvious that anybody can look at a piece of art and have some kind of criticism for it. And as far as programming game design, that's not really the case. That's a lot harder to critique at face value. So my comments are mostly just how to receive feedback and communicate back that way.
Yeah.
So I guess the big thing is if you're getting paid to do the artwork, remember that it's a job and not to get too precious about it. Also, keep in mind what he said, that if there is something that you think is a really strong decision, definitely do defend it. But in the end of the day, it's not your money, it's not your choice.
Yeah.
So don't forget. Also, well, I guess I could say this. As an artist, getting feedback, probably one important thing to consider is not to be too vague with giving feedback. Try to pinpoint something specifically about it that you're not happy with. If somebody's designing an enemy, it's like, okay, well, this is supposed to be a heavy enemy. It doesn't have as much armor plating as I would like, rather than saying, oh, doesn't feel big enough. That's not helpful, because then they're just gonna get the transform tool, make it bigger, and now you're back at square one again. So try to really take a moment to think about what you don't like about the artwork, or what you would like changed. What else?
Well, I feel like when I'll kind of echo what Burton was saying. Like when I first look at something, maybe I have like a passionate response, and I have to kind of temper that a little bit and let the analytical side take over and kind of look it over and decide what are the specific things, like you said, that I don't like, so that I'm not just saying, oh, I hate that. Let me actually look it over and think about it some and decide what are the specific aspects of this that I would do differently, or that I think would better fit the game. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to make the game better. I mean, that's the goal of everybody that works on a game is just to make the best game that you possibly can. That doesn't always come across, I guess, but
Yeah, and I guess on feedback, one of the things that's going to help you communicate better if you're working with somebody who's just a programmer or maybe only game design, is to have at least a basic understanding of how your artwork is going to be implemented in the game. So if you're working in Unity, have some kind, at least do a couple tutorials on Unity, so you know how things go.
That's a good idea.
Look at how, for example, maybe textures are used in Unity, so you know I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that. If you're doing some kind of, for example, with pixel art, there's like certain things that you have to understand about pixel art when they're putting in the engine. We had some issues with artifacting of the assets just from like one setting of how to import the stuff into Unity.
I accidentally left it maybe 10 assets. I forgot to change them from compressed to true color, which on pixel art basically makes it into a JPEG.
Yeah.
You know,
which is not good.
Which is not good. You
Yeah.
see little dots and things all over it.
Yeah. So definitely have that understanding. So if there's some kind of technical issue, maybe you can know what to say, like, oh, I can fix this, or you can just avoid having those issues later down the line.
I think that goes a long way with employers. Being able to have that skill set is something that we don't want to have surprises when we hire people for that stuff, and sometimes we don't. I guess when we're getting going with somebody new, we don't think about what they don't know until they give us something and it's short of what we were expecting. So it's like,
Yeah. What about giving direction to your artist? How do you get yourself and the artist on the same page?
a lot of reference.
Reference
A lot of-
material.
Yeah, I use Pinterest a lot and talk about qualities of certain things and make sure we're descriptive.
I used to say I would never use Pinterest.
Yeah.
Now I use Pinterest.
I think one thing that I did when I started using it did poorly was just pinning stuff, and you're like, what about it did you like? What about it spoke to you? And then you end up with too many things that are like, could be anything. It's cool. It should be cool, but
It's a lot of
No,
cool
it's-
images.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
was
like, what's particularly about, what was the quality of this thing that
Yeah,
you
yeah, that's a
particularly
good
liked?
point.
And so I'm having to get, just anytime I use Pinterest now, I'm like, I need context of why the heck I pinned that.
Yeah, I was going to mention that actually. It's very helpful for an artist to get maybe mood boards or just a folder full of concept images, but they all have to have a purpose. And you have to make sure to explain what that purpose is. Because when you're looking at a piece of art or an image or a photo, you can have two completely different takeaways.
Right. I might
from
be looking
it.
at this part of it, and
Yeah,
you
it's
are
like-
looking at this part. And
Yeah, it's like, oh, here's a cool, mech or something. It's like, oh, well, I really like the colors. And then the other person's like, oh, well, I really like the feet. I'm like, okay, well, you didn't tell me, so we got to get on the same page here. Always make sure you have a point when you're submitting these kinds of images. And if they don't make it, then ask, hey, what particular things did you like about these images? What should I be taking out of these? Yeah, make sure you're asking questions if they're not giving you enough direction.
And how early should you get the artist involved?
Oh, I just had this conversation yesterday with the project. You're talking about just in a general game?
Yeah, and I mean, should they be involved in the initial planning? I mean, or how much should they know about what you're doing?
I'm kicking off something right now, and we're having this discussion about how much because it's basically I'm the only programmer, and I'm also trying to run the company, and my wife helps with business. I have a lot of responsibilities, and so like for me to help start up an art pipeline and figure out, demystify all the ways we're gonna make assets and create them and import them and configure them and all that stuff, I'm not quite ready yet. I just need to like find the fun for this game idea. So like I have an idea of what this game's gonna be, but I kind of need some space to like work with blocks and spheres
Right.
and stuff like that, because I've done that with my first game and I felt like I shipped a pretty
Yeah.
turd.
As a programmer, you really don't want to get the art. I mean, I generally don't want to get the art too early. I want to
Yeah.
have a pretty good prototype before I bring art in. Otherwise, it's a mess. It can get a little messy.
Yeah, I ended up like
Not that it
giving.
isn't messy, but
I ended up spending most of my time tending to that art thing, and I let my responsibilities as a programmer fall to the wayside, and so the experience suffered. Visually, it was a looker, and that opened doors for us, but it was not the gameplay experience I wanted to.
Yeah,
I
because
never got back to getting
the pressure
able
from
to adjust it.
publishers is to have this vertical slice, right, that looks perfect,
Yeah.
just like what the final game will be. But
What has to be what I've been told is like from publishers is like five minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, gameplay, and part of the art. So if you have like 3 hallways of gameplay, like one of those hallways needs to be indicative of final production quality.
Mhm.
So it's like, we have to figure out exactly.
So you
what we're
have to
going
have,
for,
yeah, exactly. It's
at
kind
least
of hard.
for a couple minutes.
Do you want to do
No
the Q&A
pressure.
or we still have it? I think so.
I think we're pretty good.
But that's
Good. So you want to open up for questions, or did you have any?
yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm good
Any
for whatever.
questions? Go ahead.
So when it comes to VR, what would you ask of or need from a concept artist that would be different than a regular?
Ooh, good question.
Well, I can speak from experience of what not to do. I worked on an augmented reality project with the HoloLens earlier this year, and it was designed in a very traditional way with like a bunch of PDFs of all the different points of the experience. And what ended up happening was, I don't know how many of you guys have used the HoloLens, but the way it's marketed, it looks amazing. In actuality, this is all you can see. This is your screen, so you can see the world, but this is literally the only part that's rendering 3D stuff, and so you're having to move around to look at that. And so what we ended up doing, because we didn't design it from a very contextual manner, like we didn't honor like I can look over here and there could be content over here, was I literally had to design like basically a whole app like in this little thing. It was the biggest waste. So just to understand when it comes to concept, just having for VR and AR, it's like just work in space, like paint a world that goes beyond just a flat thing. So I would say like there's some people doing some concept art. I don't know his name, but I can look it up on Facebook. But there's like in 3D code, there's some sort of thing that you can do where you can like move around like a camera in 3D and paint in 3D. So it kind of shows like that kind of stuff is like, I feel like it's getting closer to like if I were to reapproach that project with them and we were involved earlier, I would have helped them conceptualize where these menus and things the menus were flat and stuff. It was just like a terrible use of being able to actually move in space or whatever. So just being able to take something that's traditionally 2D and paint a picture of how it moves about. So if I were looking at concept art, I'd probably be like mocking it up in Maya or something as a concept artist. It'd be showing you like how it, this is what they're
So it's
looking at.
interactive
Start,
concept
but you
art?
can look over it, yeah. But it's really giving you.
Interesting.
And you can do that with the 3D cut stuff. It's like people are just drawing. Like I don't even quite understand it. I have the program, but I didn't know that you could do that. But,
Any other questions? No? Go ahead.
If you're looking at advice for, I guess, wrangling artists for projects like board games or tabletop games?
It's a good question. Well, I guess the main difference is that you're talking about printed medium versus digital, so you'd have to find somebody that has some experience in that world. I actually, in my previous job a long time ago, I worked with a lot of those kind of artists, like graphic designers, really, is what you're talking about there.
you're talking about like concept, like it could be on like a magic card or something like that.
Illustrations like that.
And you're wondering how to find those people, or what was your question with respect to
Yeah,
that?
I mean, what's the best way to find people who do stuff like that? And how does the process?
Probably the same way
Yeah.
that you would do it otherwise. I mean,
There's a lot of overlap. Some people I worked
Yeah.
with at Hi-Rez are now doing like they're working at. They're working at Hi-Rez, but they're also doing like.
it's probably a lot of the
Magic the
same
Gathering
artists.
cards.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap between the games. So if you see people like one guy, he used to work at CCP a long time ago here, but now then he works at Bungie, and now he works at Riot. But he does like Magic the Gathering cards in his nights and weekends. Like so, it's just a lot of people that are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I would do some searching on the internet. I mean, look on Reddit, see if there's people.
Yeah,
ArtStation,
if you go to a lot of portfolio sites,
Yeah. DeviantArt.
one thing to remember when you're doing that, though, is to really try to narrow your focus, because otherwise you'll just be browsing for, say, oh, that's cool too. Oh, that's cool too. That looks great too.
Yeah.
Just pick, I wanted this style, you know, if they don't have contact information that's easy to find, just get rid of that portfolio. It's unfortunate, but just make everything easier on you so you can pick somebody fast, start sending out your emails, and figuring out what's going on.
And a lot of people are probably just going to ignore your emails, so don't just email like one person.
Yeah.
You're going to need to email, shotgun it.
And even if you contact somebody, like a lot of times when I reach out to people, they're like people that I'm like, they're probably just way too expensive, and
Yeah.
sometimes they are, but those people
Doesn't hurt
can
to
also-
ask.
Yeah, those
Which-
people can also be really helpful in how to find the people that you can work with, or if
Yeah, that's a
maybe
good point.
somebody's too busy, sometimes like misconnections, like they can help you put you in touch with the right people. So.
Yeah, I've done that before, yeah.
Or you could like go try to connect with somebody at SCAD, like a professor or something, who can point you at a student if your budget is low.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's all you students, that's your opportunity to get in the door.
Yeah.
But remember, as we said before, don't undervalue your work.
Yeah.
Your time is
And
valuable.
As artists, like try to take opportunities to communicate with the people that you look up to, and ask them for advice, pick their brain, see if they need any help. Like maybe they are too busy and they'll actually like kind of your work might be white labeled, but like under their name or something like that. I don't know exactly how that stuff works, but I've seen that happen a lot in the audio field, where you work with somebody and you're actually not working with them. You're working with somebody that they
subcontracted.
have,
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
But anyway, those things are really good for building the connection, and you can say you've at least done work with them. Maybe you can't take credit for exactly what it is, but those kind of things can open up doors, and those people can help. Oftentimes, when you associate with people who are a lot further along, they can help you get a mindset of how to approach things professionally, and just maybe just improve like the way you carry yourself in business. I've found that's very helpful.
Cool. Any other questions? Go for it.
I was just wondering, from your guys' perspective, do you think, apprenticeships are still practice? And then if they are, how would you go about searching for those and conducting that sort of thing?
Apprenticeship as in working at like a studio or something like that?
Well, maybe not necessarily. Well, just working under someone, just
Mhm.
Develop your skills.
Huh.
I mean, it's probably a lost art, but every so often I hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I actually do want to do, but I just don't have the finances for it. Because I wouldn't want to ask somebody to
Go
work
work for
work
free
under
for
me,
Ron
for
Gilbert.
free. I don't think that's fair from my perspective, anyways. But when you say apprenticeship, do you mean something that leads into like a work engagement, or just something for improving your talents, or?
It could kind of both.
Okay, well, from the perspective of just improving your talents, there's a lot of good communities online where you can just post your work and people will drop in, give you some really good feedback. I know when I have some free time, I'll go on there and just give some feedback on people who are doing pixel art and stuff like that.
Where do you do that?
On Reddit, pixel art,
Okay.
yeah, mostly.
You ever go to Pixel Join or anything?
I probably should,
Yeah.
but I put up some art there, and I got disqualified because I wasn't meeting like certain standards of pixel art, just because there's like there's in-game post-processing that I included or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to-
Yeah.
A little bit.
The
Which-
snobby pixel artists.
Well, I'm not going to say they're snobby. There's a lot of great people there, but
I might talk about some of that.
it just
in my
put me
rant.
off. It just put me off, so I just found other communities to go to where it's not so strict.
Yeah.
But that would be a good place if you're interested in pixel art. And Wave the Pixel, I think, I don't know if it's newer or not, but that's a good one as well.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
But for game companies, do you guys?
Facebook has a pixel art group that's pretty active. You can post stuff and people will give you feedback. I don't know about internships or apprenticeships or anything like
The only
that.
company I think that I've really heard, well, I mean, companies have like internships. So
Yeah,
Hi-Rez
internships
has
I
that.
could see,
But I want to
maybe.
say like Platinum Games, that it's Japanese. But they do hire American
Yeah.
artists, but they have like a really cool looking.
I'm sure there's a lot of game
program.
studios that would hire you for free if you if you have good portfolio.
When I went to
They'll probably pay you, actually.
I don't know how many people I've even told this, but when I went to Hi-Rez, like one of the things was like I didn't know Unreal, and I wanted to learn Unreal, so I was gonna like trick them into paying me to like learn Unreal. And unfortunately, we ended up doing a good job with Unity, and they made us stay with it. But while I was there, one of the things that I would do is I'd go. I'm interested in all aspects of game production, so I would go and like hang out with the guys who sculpt the characters and like learn about
Yeah.
ZBrush. And I even went to guys who were working on what's now like Paladins, and I would say like, hey, do you think you could like show me, like just give me a challenge of like a task that you guys would do in Paladins, and like just let me like try to figure it out.
I mean, one path is to do something like that, but get in as a QA or something, you know, a lower level job, but try to make friends with the people who are doing the job you want to do, and
Just
see if you
getting in the door
yeah.
and being able to like go and like, you know, even if you have an agenda of like that's, you know, these are the people that I'm gonna sit next to every day, you know, these are the kind of things, but like
Yeah,
I mean, if they know you, you're going to be the first one they're going to look at when the job opening comes up.
So two things. Sorry, I'll get to you right in just a second. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, first, there's a lot of students here. So if you're earlier in your years, or even if you're later in your years, there's inevitably going to be somebody who's better at you, somewhere nearby. Just ask them, hey, how'd you do that, or how, whatever. Hopefully they'll be nice and help you out. Also, again, doing collaborative projects is a good way to improve your skills and learn from the other people that are around you. And if your professors are part of like industry stuff, definitely talk to them. I mean, don't be afraid to ask them, hey, do you know this thing? Or do you know who I should talk to? Could you give me a recommendation? That kind of thing. And I forgot the other thing, so we'll just go to the next question.
people.
I was just, oh, go ahead. No,
Yeah,
I was
please.
just
Go
gonna
ahead.
ask how fluid those departments are. Like, if I were to go to a studio for QA, like, how easily could I, you know, weasel my way into the art department?
I mean, I would
depends.
assume it depends on the studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Everyone's probably different.
In the end, you're still going to have the skills.
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
to have the
So-
chops. So I mean, if you come in and you're like, your work is like, if you're just starting and your work is like 80% of what the guys doing it have been doing it for a couple of years, or 70% or whatever, you know, you can stand in the same room as those guys.
But were you at the keynote last night? Jesse Shell said enthusiasm
Yeah.
counts for a lot. So I mean, you know, be that person, and who
And that-
knows, right?
And what I was gonna say was like people like associate with people who humble you. Like don't like the people that you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to like do what they do all day, or I'd love to work with somebody like that. Like contact those people and invite them if they're here. Like invite them for like coffee or lunch or something like that. I've learned a lot, even
That's a
just
good
from a
idea.
mindset standpoint. And if you like, you can go to GDC. There's tons of opportunities to meet people there, and
I've heard a few
pick their
people
brain.
tell stories about just cold emailing people and asking if they'll be their mentor, like Skype with them once a month or something. Which you'd be surprised how much that might work. I mean, someone might agree to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I reached out to somebody who's still like kind of around the Boston area like a long time ago, when I was like, I wasn't even in school for games, and I was just like reached out to him. Sometimes people will be super helpful and give you at least just like a glimmer of hope that you could.
Well, it's
actually do
flattering
this
for the
one.
person you're reaching out to that someone wants their time, you know, and
Mm.
so a lot of times they may be cool with helping you out.
Yeah, actually, I just gave unsolicited advice or whatever, but somebody wanted to hire me for doing an animation for a story that they were working on, and I could tell they were very, very early in the process of getting this whole project set up, and that they didn't seem to have as much experience with animation specifically and how to properly set up a production. So I just sent them an email, and they're pretty happy with it. So it was a long email too, but so yeah, I mean, even if you're early or you know, maybe you'll get lucky too. But you don't get anything if you don't contact anyone.
Yeah. One of the ways I got my first professional job was so I tried a couple times to get some sort of gig, like short-term kind of stuff, and I would ask them, and not all companies are cool with this. I think the bigger they are, the more like, I don't know if it's like a legal thing or whatever, but like I would ask people, what could I do in the next 3 days that would like knock your socks off? And then I basically wouldn't sleep, and I would do that. And it wouldn't always turn into an opportunity with them, but I just ran into, I used a recruiter to get my first job because I didn't know who to ask for. I wasn't ready to work in the games industry, but he still remembered like all those things that I had. I had these like cobbled together things that were like 80% of like this game or that game or something like that, and eventually one employer saw all that and they gave me a job before I even had a degree. So
That's cool.
It was just like, you know, not everything's going to turn into like a gold mine or whatever, but you know, all those experiences will they'll build character, they'll help you you know, refine the rough edges and the way that you present your work and the quality of your work and the efficiency at which you do your work, and so that it's all going to lead somewhere. So it's worth taking the shots and putting yourself out there. It's really hard to. I know for me it's super hard showing my work early still, but it leads somewhere.
Yeah, I think most employers want people that are go-getters, and that, you know, reaching out is one of the ways you can show that. What's your question, Ron?
It's kind of going towards what Burton was just saying there. So you talk about you guys know about the triangle for speed, quality, and cost, right?
Yeah.
Pick two.
You can only have two, right? How has that surfaced in your negotiations and or setting your rates for working with artists or, you know, working with respective projects?
So I didn't add this earlier, but when I do work, I'm usually hired as a developer, and I do a developer that knows a lot about that barrier, that going across the fence into creative stuff, so I can help creative succeed and stuff like that. But what I usually do is I will agree to work for a certain amount of money a week, and I will give anything and everything that's needed there, but I make sure that amount is, you know, there. If I think they're going to work me over 40 hours, I'm just going to make sure that it's well worth it for me. And a lot of times I'll value my work off of the opportunity of, like, sometimes it's like who I get to work with. So I get to work with somebody who helped build Battlefield 1942 or something. You know, I can just like look around and say, like, I can learn. I'm always trying to get in my work somebody that's part of it is subsidizing me learning something else. So I'm always looking to add to my skill set. So I personally do. I price myself so that they can have as much of me as they want, but I'm gonna feel well taken care of, because like I said, I have to feel like it's worth that, or I shouldn't do it.
So from my perspective, when I was hiring artists, I mentioned earlier I did an art test with 8 artists, and I said, I'll pay you for 8 hours of time, and here's this, you know, I gave them a description of the scene that I wanted, and here's, you know, what I'm going to expect back. And that kind of gave me an idea about, you know, so I knew what their rate was. They told me that. And I knew how much time they were spending, and I could see based on that what their quality level was and how quickly they could turn things out. So it actually gave you quite a lot of information about the artists, in addition to, you know, kind of letting you pick an art direction, which is another good thing about it. But
Yeah, I have 2 things. First, on the art test perspective, when you're doing art tests, there's going to be this temptation to overperform and really put out something that doesn't represent the time.
so do more hours.
Yeah, there's going to be a temptation to do more hours than you're supposed to be doing, and that can put you in a really bad position later down the line when you're actually supposed to be producing work.
Because I made that judgment call based
Exactly.
on 8 hours. Yeah. Yeah.
And back to the triangle that you were discussing earlier. Another warning is hopefully you're going to be tempted to spend more hours than you should be, because you want to produce the best artwork that you can. don't do that. Just stick to what you're, budgeted for. And if you need to get better, you need to get faster, you'll develop those skills while you're working and hopefully also while you're practicing. But you're going to put yourself in a deep hole if you just start being perfectionist about everything and over investing time in something that has a set amount of hours or a set schedule.
One thing I did when it's been a long time since I've done like an art challenge where they're like, you have this many hours or whatever, but I don't even know if I submitted anything, but I did it. I basically did it in the amount of time. I got to the end, and then I would just start over, and I would just get better at like just keep
Do it a second time.
Do the entire thing over again.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't
It's
that
an
many
interesting
hours,
idea.
but I would be like, okay, that's what I gave. It's not good enough.